There.
Hello, this is Chrystal Meach with Tao of the Heart YouTube channel, and I have Sherry Morgan back again. Thank you so much for coming on, Sherry.
My pleasure.
Before we started here, we were kind of talking about connection and what was coming through for you as a higher source. And so let's dive right in and talk about that. Like, these are chaotic times, as we were saying.
Indeed, they are, and seemingly more urgent for us to be on our spiritual paths and resolving some of those, what some people might call 3D issues.
Could you give some examples of like 3D issues?
My goodness. Well, I guess anything that is, well, for example, our expectations about how somebody should be, how we should be, I should work this many hours a day, I should get this much done, I should be further along now. Anything that's a should or a doubt or a worry or a fear are 3D issues. They're kind of mind driven issues. And maybe in our heart we don't have any issues. We have things that we see to do, places to go, whatever, but not really any issues per se. So maybe the maybe issue is a 3D phenomenon. I don't know exactly, but it seems to me that it might be.
So, when we're having these issues, what what do we need to do? I mean, it's one thing to be conscious, it's another, what do you do with it?
Take care of ourselves in whatever ways. You know, take a nap, take a hot bath, get a massage or an acupuncture or a Reiki treatment or regroup, go for a walk in the woods, hug a tree. Prayers of gratitude is, of course, my sort of number one thing. It brings us back to a more joyous, abundant place. Because as soon as we start doing prayers of gratitude, we start doing gratitude for things in nature or even in our lives that we can be missing the plenitude of, or the comforts of, or the health of, or the beauty of, the generosity of, if we in our minds. And as soon as we turn to prayers of gratitude, there's just so much to be grateful for, and it shifts our whole way of being.
Sure. Yeah, um I hear a lot about like the gratitude journals, but then I also hear about I like journals. So, if you maybe can't get to that level of gratitude, you start with, "I like this," or "I like that," and that's starting the shift, and
Ah,
then you start moving to, "I'm grateful for that,
yeah.
for
See, I
liking
haven't
that."
heard of I like journals, but I see where you're going. Yeah. Well, it could be that it's pretty weird for people. It was for me initially to, for example, go outside in nature and look at a tree, for example, and say, wow, you're beautiful. Thank you for cleaning our air. Thank you for housing the animals and the insects. Thank you for holding our earth together. Thank you for, and so on and so on and so on, right? There's so many gifts of trees, and different trees have different gifts and so on. So that can feel pretty weird because in our common culture, the one that we all grew up in, trees don't talk and trees don't aren't sentient, and why bother, and all what. But I teach the phenomenon of prayer, as you know, and the core basis of prayer is the experience of connection. And the interesting thing is that we're all, well, science and spirituality both tell us we're all one, we're all connected, but we don't experience that. So in our, the 3D world that we've come to relate in and experience is me and the tree are separate, me and the plants are separate, me and the rocks are separate, etc. And but you start to begin to dissolve that separation when you begin to relate directly with the trees and the rocks and the plants, talking to them, and they appreciate our appreciation. And if if you do it enough, you'll start to feel that they appreciate it. And then you might, like I did, start to get messages back from the tree or the plant or the moon or whatever it is that you're paying respects to, saying hi to, thanking. And the more you do it, the more gifts you become aware of. And suddenly your life is no longer as lonely as you once thought, and you're
Uh-huh.
loved. You experience that. And so there's just a huge amount of benefit. And if it's a doable step to do an I like journal before doing prayers of gratitude, what I call prayers of gratitude, it's just giving gratitude. I mean, that it's not, prayer like Sunday school prayer or something like that. It's just, hi, tree, you're beautiful. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your shade. Thank you for whatever. If we do that enough, we start to experience that that tree actually does receive and appreciate our appreciation, appreciates our relationship. We've been ignoring all these relationships that we have largely, right, in our culture. And they are relationships and they want to be related with, is what I've learned over and over. And then that's so beneficial because they can help us in countless ways. And they do, not just in those ways like for everybody, like the trees clean the air for everybody and the sun shines for everybody and so on, but personal guidance, personal. So that you can discover that. And it's like profound to discover that. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
tree loves me and I love that tree. And holy, I just got some guidance. Wow. I mean, it's a real, it's a breakthrough for a lot of people. And there's plenty of us that do talk to trees and listen to trees. But it is, I would
Yeah.
say it's a very concrete way, a very easy, free of charge, a little not completely free of time way to experience being loved, being helped, right? There's only good things that can come from it.
Yeah, as you just said that, I thought of, I've been in a entrepreneur group for the last 10 weeks, and one of the relationships that I was working on was with my mother. And and I found over this 10 weeks that um, the love was never really gone. It was my perception that it was gone. So I wasn't connected to it. So we're talking about all this connection and how to connect back to it. And, that really, once you become aware of that guidance, and for me, it was going all the way back to when I was 10 years old, when I took on this perception that um, love wasn't there unless it was outside of me. Like if I was doing something or I had to get it, not that it was already
Earn it.
here. Yeah. So, like you talking just about hugging a tree and being connected to it. It's it's about it's not just about hugging the tree physically. It's just about the perception that it's separate, like you're saying. Like you are connected to it,
And not
but
just by the touch or the eyes, but the spiritual connection, which is, I think,
yes.
where we are connected. Because clearly the tree and I are not the same. The tree's rooted over there and I'm able to walk around. And so we're not the same physically, structurally. And maybe we are from a science point of view, probably all made of the same stuff, more or less. But spiritually, we're very connected. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, and we can often see that as a mirror, like our connection to the tree. Like we see it outside of ourselves, but really it's also inside of us.
Yes. And we're inside the tree too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
love is round.
That was
That's it for
round.
today. Just kidding.
Well, let's talk about Love is Round again a little bit because that is what what I see is that is our nature, like our capital N nature. We may have a nature, my like behaving in the world nature is a little different than your behaving in the world nature, how people perceive us, or that kind of thing. And just like the trees, we could say the trees and the ocean and the clouds and so on, they're all part of nature. All of us are connected in a capital N nature called that I call love is round. Well, that I was shown is love is round. So, yes, we are all one. We're all equal. We're mutually, reciprocally loving. Like love doesn't exist on its own, it's a relational matter. And it's round, reciprocal. There's no edge. Like I was shown the universe design. I was shown a universe image, and the design of which is love is round. So there's no edges. And it's a field, and it's that field, call it spirit, it runs in and around and throughout everything, is the home of everything. I moved many, many, many times over quite a few years, and I once got a message that the big picture of all those moves was to feel at home with myself wherever I was. And I think that home with ourselves is that round love nature that we are all part of. And once we tap into that, and I seem to need to, you know, find it regularly and trust it more and more. It's a process, I think, of the maybe kind of an evolution to transition from this more material being to a more spiritual being over quite a bit of time, maybe lifetimes, and gradually become perhaps something like Jesus or Buddha, or, over time, this more and more loving being that can't really be pushed off course at some point. We're just so strongly on course with that we can't get knocked off of it. Feels like that's kind of, I've never said it like that before, but it feels sort of like that's the process. So the first step is to get in touch with love is round, to actually experience love is round, and then begin to trust it because you experience it again and again, right? You can recreate the experience.
Yeah, and
I think you've frozen, Crystal. Again.
you hear me? Can you hear me at all?
Yes, you're back. Yes. You froze a couple of times.
Huh. Yeah, yours is a little blurry too, but keep going. I think
Maybe
it's
we
just the
should,
time of day for Riverside. But anyways,
well, maybe do you think it's a better call to just call it off and do it another time? Especially you feel you
no, because it's recording on your end and my end. So it'll bring both of our conversations together, even though it looks blurry between the two.
okay,
So
okay.
we'll try to keep going.
Okay,
In what you were saying, I was like, um, was shown there's a tree, and then there's only that one tree. Each tree is unique, and each person is unique. Showing up authentically connected as I am. Who am I? And who as part of this experience? And how do I show up as me?
yeah. So yes, and I think the more authentic I am, I'm discovering over the years. I guess all every step of the way, that's not quite true, but I felt authentic. I felt like authentically me, but that authentically me keeps transitioning. Just like you said, there's no two people alike, there's no two trees alike, there's no two planets alike, there's no two anything alike. We're also always evolving. We're always growing, and we're growing not necessarily in size, learning, changing, getting new viewpoints. We may at some point be shrinking. We seem to do that when we're old enough. But yeah, so I was talking years ago, not long after Love is Round was shown to me by Spirit. I was talking with a friend about it, and she said that's really interesting because I've always thought love is a circle, and I've thought about that some, and I realized no, love is not a circle because a circle is closed. So if it was closed, if the universe, if the design was a closed circle, we'd have repeat, 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 right? Now, there's some similarity, of course, from one day to the next, one year to the next, one season, winter this year, winter next year, and so on. But they're never identical because it's a spiral, not a closed circle. So I don't know if I can illustrate that in my words sufficiently well, but I see that is nature's way of creating unique, 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 unique. Every nanosecond, it's a new nanosecond. So no two things are identical, and nor are we identical from one moment to the next. Everything is in this spiralic evolving or something like that. And then we can get really stuck because our way of thinking can be patterned. We can stay stuck in a particular line of thought in various ways. We think, oh, that person is always this way, and I'm always this way, and or that government or that whatever. We tend to in particular boxes with particular descriptions, but nothing ever stays the same except if we attribute that quality to something. And that's a danger, of course. Yeah. Because and people will fix us that way too. Oh, she's always like, she's one of those or something. But no, I'm also changing and shifting and becoming something new all the time. We all are.
Yeah. I mean, that's just fascinating. I mean, it's mind-blowing for me because I'm just thinking of like that 10-year-old self that took on the belief of love is outside of myself and how I created from that point up to now, which is 3 decades. So, and I look back at it and I'm, like how it froze. But as my life was going, it was almost like a template that I took on. And I see that the same way as the I am, who am I? Well, I took on this template and I created from this template. And there's a perfection and a beauty to that. And even though it created all this pain, it also created all this awareness back to the love already being there. And it's almost like rewriting the script and rewriting the past.
Yes. Now the way that I did that, well, there's many ways, I guess, but it wasn't so much like a cognitive attempt, like journaling, for example, and examining what are my beliefs and changing them or trying to see if I could change them. Or that wasn't an approach that I took. Perhaps some people are successful with that, but when I got on a personal growth path through seminars and workshops, very intense ones, many of them, and had insight into the me that I'd formulated, the me that I'd constructed to survive, to be good enough, to be loved. In my case, if I work hard enough, if I do enough, and if I do it well enough, then people will like me. So that was a model that I had for 40, 50 years, whatever. I mean, a lot of years, and really wore myself out and stressed myself to the hilt with that model
I'm sure. Hmm.
because there's never good enough. inside that, right? There's always more to do and more to prove. And yeah. So I began, you were talking about doing some work earlier with your mom and your relationship with your mom and how you love, how you found that, well, just in that cognitive way of figuring out what love is, you put it in a certain box, and then you discovered in the process of the work you did that love was just there always. It was there. And you just had to take away the packaging that you had before. Well, there's love. Well, it was, yes, and it is that way. It's really a good way to say it. Because, yeah, if we start stripping away all those beliefs and patterned thinking and so on that we have, underneath all of that, there is just this love that we're designed in and we're made of and we're connected in, and even love of self and love of other and so on. Even those that we were really sure are not lovable. It's quite embarrassing, actually. It's super embarrassing to discover, oh my gosh, I'm lovable. I don't have to do anything and I'm lovable.
Yeah, and what's interesting is
Yes, which takes us back to that very famous quote by Marianne Williamson, right? I don't think I know it off by heart, but it's not something that we're most afraid of. It's our beauty. Could we let ourselves shine?
yeah, and it goes back to being authentic too. Like us, can we hold the space for that when
I can
others
share. Yeah. Sorry.
and don't necessarily perceive it the way we're perceiving it? Can we hold the space of what we're authentically feeling and be vulnerable in that moment, even when it's not reflected back the way we want it?
Yes, and I don't know about for you, but in those sort of moments in life when you're just busy doing life, it's not so easy, not so automatic to stop and reflect in the action of life, right?
Yes.
Seems to take us sort of stepping aside, maybe reflecting back, for example, oh, well, I didn't like how that went. Or, I was a bit critical, or I whatever it was, right? You can, but in the moment, I have a harder time catching myself. Sometimes I can. I want to share, if I may. There's very recently I saw a dynamic that I was playing out that call it my personal transformation moments are almost always super embarrassing to catch myself behaving in a way that is not my standard, but there it is again or something. But anyways, I have a friend that I've had for many years, but for 40 or 42 years or something like that, we completely lost touch, and we got reacquainted about 3 years ago. And this is a male, and I have been maybe increasingly kind of after him to get healthy. So I followed a kind of holistic health path over the 40 odd years in between when we knew each other. And he followed a completely different path and was very successful in in what he did and so on. And, but not very healthy. And so I've been after him, don't eat so much sugar, you should get out walking more, well, through a series of witnessing something, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, came, speaking of reflection, on the Monday morning, some incidents from the day before came back to me. And I began to see a dynamic that I had set up that I had no idea. And what I call it is be careful of your good intentions. So it was my good intention to help him get healthy. But what I was really doing, or what else I was doing, I won't say that that wasn't a good intention, but what else I was doing was I was setting up an expectation that he should live like this. What looked like me trying to be helpful and good intention, set up an expectation that he's only okay if he does these things and gets healthier in my standard. So I withheld love in a way because he hadn't met my standards, my good intentions. And it was super embarrassing to discover that. It was very, very, very humbling. So he lives about 40, 45 minutes drive away. And I drove out there and said, I'm sorry. This is what I see now for the last 3 years. This is what I've been doing. And I'm really sorry. So, anyway, in my experience, the moments of growth are often super humbling, like very kind of embarrassing, humbling.
Yeah, and yeah, I certainly resonate with your story. Like, and it shows up so many different ways. Like I was talking about learning that I had taken on love was outside of myself. In my romantic relationship, that's what happened too. So while I had the expectation that our relationship should be one way, he couldn't meet that expectation. And so it's kind of cruel in a way to have that expectation when the person you're not meeting them where they are.
And loving them where they are. Yeah. 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 It's tricky
So
business
yeah. Yeah.
because we don't, I mean, how many years have I well intentioned many bits of good advice here and there and not seen behind that is this standard I've established for what's okay or who's okay and who's not okay.
Yeah, and I guess once you come to that awareness, like for me, it was after I came to that awareness, it wasn't about him. It was about me. And
Yes.
it was really about me loving myself. So that was just a reflection, that relationship was really the reflection of my inner relationship with
And
myself.
it always is so, right? One of my teachers many years ago said, whenever someone says something about somebody else, they're really saying more about themselves than they are about the other person. So, how I've seen that is, yeah, so I had this standard for my friend that you should this and that. But, I'm talking about that's what I'm saying about me. And more recently, I saw, yes. So when we make ourselves wrong, because I did that for many years, and I can still go there, occasionally for sure, but not as relentlessly as I once was for sure. When we make ourselves wrong, "Oh, Sherry, you're so stupid, or you're not, you don't deserve, you're unlovable, whatever. When I do that, who's who's talking that's saying more about the speaker than about the person spoken to. So who's the speaker and who's the spoken to? That's an interesting one. So if it's my mind self, that constructed self, the one that we learned how to construct this self so that we'd be okay in the world, get along and be liked hopefully. And then who's that person talking to? And if that part of me that's being spoken to believes this part that's speaking, then that part's also sunk, right?
Yeah. And kind of reminds me of like the construct of perfectionism. Like perfect compared to what? What you constructed
Mm,
in your mind.
yeah. Yeah. And I think many of us have some form of that. In order to be loved, I need to be perfect in this way or that way or, whatever. And there's no
Yeah, and
cheese.
what was I gonna say? That kind of comes back to a romantic relationship too. Like, like women often sometimes, and me included, it's kind of like, well, being intimate, like my body should look this way. But, when you have a relationship that is intimate with the right person, they don't see it the way you see it. They just see the perfection that already is.
And that's what we call love, right?
The reflection that we always want to have, right?
I was thinking way back 35 years ago ish or something like that. I was engaged to be married. And I remember saying to my fiance something like, I don't remember my exact words, but it was something like, promise you won't die before me. Like something like that. When I was thinking about it the other day, I was thinking, I guess what that's a remark that somebody who's found love and doesn't want to let it go. Like don't we, isn't that what we're all looking for, is we want to be loved, accepted, valued, and when we find it, it's like such a treasure that please don't let anything happen to this feeling that I have. But I think that's our journey. That's our ongoing journey. And maybe we don't need to come back into human form again after we've really found it. When we found it and it's always there. And
Fascinating.
maybe we do, I don't know. But it seems to me that's what we're here for, is to get closer and closer to that. Love is round, love is constant, love is our nature. Yeah.
Beautiful. I think we went through a lot in a short amount of time. Well, it's like 38 minutes, but I kind of feel like we should stop while we're ahead.
Okay, good. Perfect. Works for me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sherry.
Thank you
Did
very
you have
much.
any last words, like how people can get a hold of you?
My website is loveisround.net, and my little book if is on there, Prayers of Gratitude, an ancient context for prayer and healing, if people want to check that out and try their hand at Prayers of Gratitude. Totally recommend it.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for coming on today.
You're super
Bye,
welcome, and thank
everyone.
you very much. Bye bye. Bye, Crystal.